A warm welcome to all my viewers. Today, I'm going to explain to you how to write a value based learning design. This is specifically meant for the practicum included in course 11 of B.Ed semester 4, Peace and Value Education. Before I start explaining the design or how to write the design, I should recapitulate the revised Bloom's taxonomy to all of you. As we all know that Bloom's taxonomy as well as revised Bloom's taxonomy both have three domains: cognitive, affective and psychomotor. Cognitive domain assesses basically the mental skills and knowledge. Affective domain assesses the growth in feelings, emotions, attitudes, and values, and the psychomotor domain pertains more to the manual and the physical skills as outcomes. Now, the usual learning designs that we prepare for our B.Ed lessons or pedagogy subjects, they are based on the cognitive domain, wherein we have the cognitive process dimension, including remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, and knowledge dimension, including factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive knowledge. Now, value development mainly pertains to the affective domain rather than the cognitive domain. So, we need to know what the affective domain comprises of. Chiefly, it has 5 levels of increasing complexity. That is, the first one is receiving, wherein the individuals receive certain information through stimuli and they become aware of it and they are willing to listen to it. So that is the receiving part. And each level also has specified action verbs, okay, which I have mentioned here. The next level is responding. That is how an individual responds after receiving that information or the stimuli. That is, they actively participate, they react to that information, and they find satisfaction in the response. They give some kind of response, okay, through participation. The third one is valuing. Valuing, that is attaching worth or commitment to a certain object, phenomenon, or behavior. That is when you feel you connect it with those values that are being taught to you. Fourth one is organizing, that is prioritizing, where you connect the values, you resolve conflicts between them, you prioritize them, you set priorities, and you build a value system. And then you have characterizing. Characterizing, that is where the individual internalizes whatever values are being inculcated. So, the beliefs that are integrated to one's character, they mostly comprise this characterizing level. So, these are mainly the 5 levels. All right. So, first one is receiving, second one is responding. That is, first an individual, whatever, say for example, if you are reading a lesson, whatever lesson which is also developing some kind of an affective aspect, that is the emotional aspect of the learner, then the reactions go from one step to another. All right, that is receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and characterizing. Now, how do we assess the affective domain? Cognitive domain is assessed through the worksheets, the tests that we take, that whatever we can assess, we can formulate an examination and we can assess them very easily. But affective domain is not very easy to assess. Basically, if you have to assess how far the individual is influenced in terms of emotions, Then you have to perform structured observations, which the teacher can perform or can do through peer ratings. Use behavioral checklists. Okay, so to see whether the individual is actually demonstrating certain values or certain emotions like empathy, cooperation, willingness, etc. Or the self-reporting tools using, that is, you may preparing a survey and administering it, where the learner themselves answer the questions through, and they are rated through Likert scale or using a questionnaire. And the third one is reflective journals, that is portfolios, where the students are asked to write certain portfolios and about their emotional responses, and or write in journals about their emotional responses and personal values, and what kind of emotional impact the lesson has created. Okay, so this helps for organization and characterization. And finally, you can have role playing or simulations, wherein they can prepare plays or skits or role plays or simulated situations where those ethical dilemmas or emotional scenarios can be enacted, and thereby the individuals can understand the you can understand how far the individuals have been able to actually internalize those values. So now we come to the main body of the practicum. When we write the practicum, that is the value based learning design, you have to just begin with the introduction, and then you have to write down the what is basically a value based learning design. What is a learning design? First you mention, and then you mention what is a value based learning design, a value laden learning design, how it differs from any other learning design. Then the purpose of, what is the purpose of a value based learning design or preparing a value based learning design? That's precisely like because specifically when we are teaching certain subjects which are inculcating certain values, there specifying those values becomes very essential, an essential part of the lesson, right? Then we come to the statement of the practicum. That is exactly whatever is written in the syllabus book. And the objectives of the practicum, very simple, just to prepare a value based learning design on the topic so and so, and to specify the values of the lessons that the students can learn through the lesson. Okay, now let me tell you, in different subjects, in identifying lessons pertaining to value development is very common in case of subjects like languages, all right, wherein you have stories or poems which depict certain values through the lines, through specific lines, and through certain themes or the morals. What happens in with the other subjects? You have to identify those topics through which certain values can be developed. All right. For example, in case of history, or certain events in history, in fact, all events in history, they teach us certain lessons. Right. Then topics related to the ecosystem, sustainability, these topics are relevant both in case of science as well as in case of geography. All right. So, reasoning ability, reasoning and rationalizing, these things are also pertaining to mathematics. But it is easier for students to write a value based learning design on subjects like history, geography, science, certain aspects, not in all sciences, and especially in case of languages. So, choose your topic very prudently so that you can identify how they can develop certain values, and they can appeal to that affective domain of the students, right? Now, in case of the general format, the same thing goes. There is no difference in the general format. as you have learned, the goals and the objectives, you do the same thing as revised Bloom's taxonomy. Just mention two domains. One is the cognitive domain, and the other one is the affective domain. In a value based learning design, if you miss the affective domain, then you miss on a very important part of the message that you want to convey through the lesson. So in cognitive domain, under cognitive domain, your objectives remain just the same under remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. Okay, so in certain cases, for example, if you need to evaluate or justify the moral significance of certain actions taken in the lesson, that you can depict, which has dual, both value development as well as evaluating, that you can incorporate into the uh, conceptual domain. In case of other subjects, for example, certain actions taken by certain emperors or certain political leaders, how far they were, sort of, how far they were responsible for certain um, consequences on the humankind, or certain, in case of ecological changes, certain human actions, how far they were responsible for certain damages or changes in the ecosystem. Those things can be also written. Objectives can be included in under evaluating dimension. In case of creating, you can write, in normal cognitive dimension, paragraphs and all. Apart from that, you can also ask them to design a role play or something on something like this, or like, for example, I'll tell you, like, um, uh, maybe the interactions between the Aryans, an interaction between an Aryan and a Dravidian. I'm asking from, a topic from history. Okay, I'm describing a topic from his history. Then what you can say is, in certain cases, you can ask them to create a poster depicting the values learned from the lesson. Okay, or construct an essay based on the values depicted in the lesson. Okay, so, or may prepare a project. Okay, so they will all come under create um, procedural knowledge. And in case you are asking them to write an essay on what values you have learned and how you're going to use them in your daily life, there it will be create metacognitive knowledge. All right. So now let me talk about the expressive objectives. Expressive objectives is something which we write exclusively in the subject English. Those who have done pedagogical analysis in English, all of you know that we have a certain objectives uh, called the expressive objectives, developed by Eisner, and these objectives actually note down those objectives wherein individuals are able to learn certain things and imbibe them or incorporate them into their own lives, basically certain values and a certain philosophy of life, which you cannot assess through an assessment test, a conventional worksheet, or maybe an achievement test, and depict them inside your blueprint. All right, those are usually depicted in the expressive objectives. But for the students of other subjects apart from English, you don't need to incorporate expressive objectives because it's not there in your own pedagogical analysis designs. So it's better that you don't include this. I'm asking only the students of English subject to include expressive objectives. We have been doing this earlier. So here we are depicting what, certain, see, apply the values of empathy, honesty, compassion, and respect learned from the story in their own lives, or develop a sensitivity towards, economically disadvantaged people. I'm just giving certain examples. appreciate the importance of kindness, fairness, and human dignity, demonstrate socially responsible behavior by applying the values learned from the lesson in real life situations, or use moral lessons from of the story to make ethical decisions in everyday life. These I have starred them because I have used them again later on in the affective domain part. So in these expressive objectives, you can mark certain things that you cannot assess them directly using an achievement test. So they cannot be put under the cognitive domain. So we have put them under expressive objectives. But I am repeating it once again. Those students who do not belong to the subject English need not include this part, because you are writing or you're preparing learning designs based on your own subjects, so you need not include this part. Now we come to the affective domain. As I said, so students, apart from language subjects, it's important that you choose topics through which the affective domain can be, activated. So the choice of the lesson is very, very important. So what will you write? The students will be able to pay attention. I've mentioned those specific action verbs which are permissible, which are mentioned in the revised Bloom's taxonomy, and that is affective domain. So the first stage, that is receiving, this part is just for explanation. You don't have to write this part. Okay, this part is for explanation. In case of receiving, what they will do is they will listen to, and thereby they will become aware of the information shared. Then they will identify specific values depicted through the lesson. You can even mention the values that are there in the lesson, and then describe the thematic significance of the lesson. If the lesson has an overall message, a thematic message, that they will be able to describe. Then the next level, that is responding, that is actively participating, engaging, and reacting. That is, they will participate in certain discussions based on the values inculcated through the lesson, and they can even read quotations similar on similar values, and participate and engage in certain active discussions on them. The third level is valuing, that is attaching personal significance. This is where the child or the individual relates to the value depicted in the lesson. All right. So there the child is sharing his or her own experience related to the incidents and the values depicted in the lesson, or maybe his or her own views regarding the values developed in the lesson, and justify certain behaviors and actions of certain characters in the lessons, or certain incidents in the lesson. All right. That leave an impact on the minds of the readers. All right. So they can, here you can, those related to other subjects, you can take up any concept also which is there in the lesson, the concept through which certain values can be developed. Okay, and ask them to justify the same. And then you have organizing, that is comparing, contrasting, and prioritizing. Here they will synthesize the values developed through the lesson, and then they will organize the concepts or the events in the lesson and develop a generalized philosophy of life. In case of the final level, that is the characterization, where the individuals are internalizing the values. That is, internalizing means absorbing them into their own lives, so, or understanding of life. So in that case, the students will consistently sort of depict them through their behavior, manifest them in their behavior and their characters. So display the values learned from the lesson in their own behavior and actions, and influence others to follow the same values in their lives, and embody the values in their own lifestyle and performance. All right. So, like for example, if you're teaching a lesson on the sustainability, So the value developed through that lesson is, using eco-friendly products, or, avoiding certain actions which might cause the which might cause pollution or degeneration of the ecosystem, or disbalancing the ecosystem, okay, or certain human actions, or tampering with nature that might lead to certain devastations or certain natural calamities. And those things can be, those concepts can very well develop values in our lives, okay, so that you can depict them in your lessons or this part. So those who are not from the subject English, you may uh, omit the affective you may omit the expressive objectives and just include the cognitive domain and the affective domain, all right, in your objective formation. So objective formation is a very important part in this learning design. Now, analyzing learners and context, this is just a conventional one. That is the contextualizing. That is, you are asking certain introductory questions. All right. So this remains just the same as a conventional learning design. Develop and select learning materials. Whatever learning materials you're using, the textbook or dictionary, flashcards. If you are specifically using certain flashcards or a chart which depicts those specific values which are being actually expressed through the lesson. For example, if you want to specify, human caused disasters, all right, or the degeneration of the ecosystem. If you prepare a chart on that, you can mention that here only, all right. So then we come to the learning strategies. In the learning strategies part, in subjects like in the languages, we usually take up certain lines or certain paragraphs and stanzas, and then we describe the strategies used on the right hand side column. If we are using any TLM along with that, we mention that. All right, it can be individual activity, pair work, group work, whatever. In different subjects, these strategies will definitely differ. But where we can incorporate value development, for example, if in a lesson you are teaching in history, if there is a particular action that you are seeing, like certain kings, secretly, you know, um making a coup against a particular ruler, or that caused some kind of an invasion upon the lesson, or they were traitors. If you're depicting certain aspects, or they uh, certain spies who actually led to certain some very devastating events in history, or maybe certain actions of certain kings which led to disastrous consequences. Those incidents in the chapters, specifically when you are describing those incidents, then you can uh, specifically mention the values to be developed through those specific concepts or the specific events or the incidents. In case of science, if you are suppose the chapter has um, um, other topics, and at the end or maybe in the middle you have something like eco conservation, or water conservation, or like uh, or you can say deforestation, these concepts coming. So there you can mention, while you are explaining those concepts, you can mention certain teaching learning strategies wherein you can specify the values to be inculcated through those specific concepts. This is what I'm saying. While you are explaining the lesson, in between the lesson or within the lesson, if you have certain concepts, certain lines, certain words, certain uh, sort of incidents or certain events or certain characters, certain actions or certain behaviors in course of the lesson, which uh, can or which relate to certain value development, then mention that, and mention the related value that can be learned through that particular incident or event or concept. All right. So then do the board work as usual. If you want to specifically mention the values to be taught through that particular portion, you can, specify the values on the board under incidental writing, and you can encircle the values so that you make it prominent that this part of the lesson is actually developing these values. All right. Otherwise, the conventional part, you don't need to do that in all the concepts. Only describe the other concepts, but in those concepts which are related to certain value development, there mention the values. All right. You don't need to mention values in each and every concept. All right. Then at the end of this learning strategies, add this section, values to be developed. Here you mention the thematic values. The thematic values, that is the overall lesson's thematic value or the moral value, or if there is any chief message through the lesson, you mention that. If for that you are using a flashcard or a chart or any other teaching learning material, you can do that. If you are organizing a discussion on that, you can also describe that. All right. But this section is different from the section in the learning strategies. In the learning strategies, I described those values to be that are to be mentioned while you are reading the lesson or while you are describing the different concepts within the lesson, and this is to be mentioned at the end of the lesson, where you have completed explaining the lesson and now you want to give them the actual extract, that is the main the kind of the main chief message or the chief values that are being developed through the lesson. Here you can also, if you want, you can use correlation. You can correlate with some other quotations or some other poems or something similar to this, or some other related topic also, which is related to this particular message or this particular thematic value, okay, or values mentioned. Then in case of design for evaluation, go for usual, just the worksheet or whatever questions you do under cognitive dimension. All right, just do it according to the objective set. Right. So if you have asked them to prepare like the objectives that I said earlier, that is, your objectives, as I said, in case of cognitive dimension, if you have asked them to prepare a poster or maybe a project, these you can assess. You can put them inside the blueprint and you can assess. But for the cognitive affective domain, that you cannot really assess. All right, this will be done through the discussions. All right, so in that case, design for evaluation, you do that, and then diagnosing weaknesses, usual weaknesses that you have, you mention those. So here there is not much of a difference, or at the most what you can do is that you can just mention that in the last part, in the evaluation part, you can just mention that evaluating the affective objectives related to evaluation of the affective domain will be done only through observation. All right, so you may or may not write, because that is something which they will imbibe in their actions, incorporate in their actions. And if they have been able to identify the objectives from the lesson that you are assessing in the cognitive domain, where you are asking them to in the create metacognitive or create procedural knowledge, that part you are already assessing them here. This part, you're already assessing them, constructing an essay or poster, preparing a poster, whether they're being able to identify the values through the lesson or not. If you want them to create some poster or a project, you can do that over here. But specifically affective domain, it's not possible, because these are the ways in which to assess the affective domain, that is through structured observations, through self-reporting tools, reflective journals, portfolios, role-playing simulations. So these are practically not possible in classroom situation. So we don't do that. We just leave that aside, and uh, we finish off with diagnosing weaknesses, uh, and suggesting the remedial measures. That's all. Okay, so that is all about your description of the uh, revised value based learning design. At the end, you just have to write a reflection. In your practicum, you have to write a reflection. That is what you learned through the practicum, um, while you were writing the practicum, what you learned through it. That's it. Your personalized views. Very short, very brief. 2-3 sentences will do. All right. So this is all about it, and please try to understand that uh, value-based learning design uh, can be incorporated in any subject. It depends upon your topic that you are teaching. It's only meant for students who have taken peace and value education. While teaching any other subject, you might be coming across a topic which is laden with values. In that case also, you can use this design uh, to develop your lesson. I hope you have understood, and I hope I've been able to make you understand. Thank you so much.